Welcome, everyone. My name is Nichel Anderson. I'm your host for my podcast show, Surviving Your Journey Towards Success. Thank you for joining me for this week of my episode for my season 2, 2018 to 2019. Today's topic I will be focusing on for this episode 34, focusing on why training employees matter for success. And I think this is a good topic. It's a very interesting topic for me because I can support the fact that training is vital, and when training is not considered to be a well investment, a way to really show that you care enough to not only put the training models together but to execute it, to teach it, and to follow up. And when companies do that, I think it really shows how much they care, not only about their brand and their business, about the employees that does the labor. Because training an employee gives that employee the knowledge that they need so they can succeed. And for the most part, most employees want to succeed. They don't want to make mistakes. They want to give their best, right? And they feel good. It's a motivating factor, right? It's all tied into my whole goal in this podcast is to motivate you on your journey to success. And so training employees give them the self-esteem that they know their job, they can do it well, they got the tools that they need. So we're going to talk about that. All right. So let's go ahead and get this podcast started today. In this day, I am thankful to the prime creator of all things that I give thanks for this blessing and opportunity that I will use it for the greater good. All right, so welcome my survivors of this journey to my podcast that aims to inspire and motivate that you will continue to have joy, peace of mind, and for your sustained success. All right, so there you have it, where you are taking a look. We are taking a look of how training employees does matter, right? So that's the topic today, why training employees matter for success. And let's just get to the most important point. Training a little produces little effort from employees because they are so overwhelmed of not really knowing majority of the job, responsibility of tasks, only focusing on production output of the product or service. Training doesn't matches up to producing extremely high quality results. Instead, it's low quality output, leading to the customer being dissatisfied, right? So business managers must look at training as both as a way not only to increase their financial gain, but funds spent that is reinvesting in the team that will pay back in tenfolds for everybody, right? If not, then again, the company will end up spending more money in rehiring staff that previously quit due to being overwhelmed, as those that I provided of what it looks like and what can happen, right? So their inability to think and decide and to work as the model presented in the training course or the training experience at the job. Now we could say, or companies can say, yeah, we have this, we have high stellar type training and this and this and all the graphics, all that is fine. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a model to make sure that the employee gets the information that is sufficient for them to remember, to memorize, and to use it, that their mind is not overworked, that the tools are up to date, not out of date. And I know a lot of companies don't like to change their systems, and so they're using old type equipment there and they're thinking it'll work, or need to re-evaluate their trainers to make sure they on par. Are they teaching right? Because everybody can't teach things, right? You can't teach everything. You want to make sure they're the right fit for the material to be able to teach the employee what they need to know. That's what I'm talking about. So you might need to do a reevaluation on that. So basically, my number one important point is to remember that training a little produces little effort from the employee when the training is insufficient. Okay, we're going to talk about how you can identify that if it is insufficient, what you could do about it. Now, my wisdom point to that is to invest in quality training, is to invest in the team forward with a supportive mechanism in place that nourishes everyone for mental peace and enjoyment. Just to think about the type of environments where the training was not sufficient. Right? Maybe the information was outdated or it wasn't enough. Maybe it was rushed. Well, you get that a lot in companies now. They rush employees through training and expect stellar results. So you're not really investing in it. Investing is like farming. It takes time. right? You get the right seed with the right soil, you nourish it, you water it. You hear me? Okay? If you think of it like that, then you can compare right there. We're jumping ahead of ourselves. You can right there can identify if your training is sufficient. Right? You don't rush employees in a 2-week training when the work itself, is covering 5 systems. Everything can't be put in the speed of a microwave. Now, of course, you have to focus on the demand and producing the right output so you can satisfy the customers that you have coming in. I understand that, but that's a whole nother identifier. There's something else going on. Why are the people leaving that are knowledgeable? Do we have in place a mentor program? I'm going to give you some of these ideas later on in the podcast to help you to get back on track, because overall, at the end of the day, we want to produce employees that are mentally satisfied, that are joyful in the sense of doing their work and feel competent enough to do it. And that helps the turnover rate, because that's the number one factor of a manager. If you have high turnover, there's a major problem and you got to find it out. And one of those mechanisms is training. All right, so let's go to what I like to my segment where I talk about the why, who, and what before I lead to strategies to succeed. So the why does this happen? The desire for financial gain in business connectivity mostly is the reason why that this happened. They want to make those funds, to come in. They see the numbers of the customers coming in and they look at each of those as most of the time dollar signs. Now, this is one aspect, right? But come on, it exists, right? So when the focus is on just producing the income, so you're just having mass productive people in a sense as if they're on a similar line to absorb all this data, not realizing how the human mind works and how it processes things, right? And an emotional tied to it. Because let me go back to the high turnover. The reason why it's high turnover is because the emotional aspect to being connected to the job is in balance, right? And everybody on this journey want to feel happy, joyful. I know we can't do it all the time, and that's a life. But when it's an unbalance, when it's like the negativity I just described all the time, then people leave. And if people leave, you don't have no one on the front line, and you're in the position of managing the front line to make sure they get what they need to get. I'm going to say a word that you're going to hear repeatedly today is nourishment. Nourishment is the same thing as I mentioned as farming, right? You can't rush the seed. There's seasons in the seed. And I know in business, it's a fast-paced but that's where it comes on the other aspect, as I mentioned, of making sure your other avenues are in check. The decision making to make sure that people are in place where they need to be, and the follow-up and all of that. But today, training is one of those areas where you have to take a hold of it and take a look at it and examine it. Okay, because that is the fuel to make sure that employee can feel competent enough and happy enough and satisfied enough at the job that they could do it. If not, the emotional aspect of them will be unbalanced, and that's why they leave, or at least one of the reasons that they leave, right? So pretty much that's why. Now, sometimes it's not that all about the money and trying to get them on the front line and produce, right? The other time is it's not all the time that they're focusing on the financial gain and try to get them on the front line no matter what, so you can produce. Sometimes the resources are just not there, so the training isn't what it could be. Okay, so that means that they don't have the necessary materials, or the company or what have you have very little or scattered. So it's here, it's there, and it's not organized, so it's not presented in a way that someone can grasp it based on the smaller resources. Or sometimes the business have both of these, meaning they actually have the resources, they have the funds coming in steadily, they're making a lot of financial income, and they just not focus on the whole emotional connection to the training element for employees. They're not thinking on a team element then, because if you have what you need, there's really no excuse that the employees are coming out of training either less educated, overwhelmed, so much information, confused, that they can't really do their job, or they do their job, but the output is not at the quality that it should be. Okay, so if you really want to examine the undercore of all of this, is to really look at the the process from beginning to end and afterwards. So who are we really talking about that need to take a hold of this message today? Basically managers, of course. Now, also employees, to look at it in a way that maybe could give them an opportunity to speak up if they can about their experience. Be proactive in the training. If they ask about, think you need more training, do you think, just actually say, yes, I do. And I believe for the most part, employees do. It's just not being heard. Okay, so managers that focus on one element in the cycle of training of employees rather than the whole objective of training is basically who we're talking about for the most part, right? The focus is rushing to get the labor out on the production line, as I mentioned earlier, or the one with limited resources, either looking at the status and just not really focusing on recreating something new based on what you're working with. And what I mean by that, for example, if you're cooking and for some reason you realize, or maybe not for some reason, you realize you don't have all the ingredients to make this recipe, but you do the best what you can and you end up making something totally different. Most of the time we're hoping that it's going to turn out great when you eat it and taste it, but you use what you got. And that's what I'm talking about on those type aspects. And for those that being creative and creating a new dish of training, just say, oh, okay, just deal with it and just fumble your way through. Again, that's an imbalance of the mental state and the emotional state to make very well. Because I'm telling you, if you have a motivated, joyful, happy, educated in the sense they know their job because of the training, how it was presented to them, and the follow up afterwards, that employee will not leave because you're giving them mental peace, you're giving them joy, all right, that they don't feel drained. And no one really don't want to feel that they can't do their job. No one don't want to feel incompetency. No one don't want to really feel they're not effective. That's not a motivator, okay? You get a demotivated employee, you got problems. You get a motivated employee, it was sore, okay? So what? Okay, what are some other aspects to this? Well, what can also happen is a lot of mistakes by employees, confused customers calling or writing in, overloaded abundant of redoing things on computer systems, or the computer system changes, right? Or worse, the computer don't change and we're on outdated information way back in the dinosaur times. Now if you're making all this financial gain, it is time to look at the system and make it. People, this days and age when you have all this technology and everything is so fast to get to, you got to think of the same way when they get to a job and all of a sudden they're processing things slower than a turtle on roller skates. Okay, I mean, you want to be able to have the means of giving them what they need. So that goes into that, producing the frustration and leading to high turnover rates. You got to remember, people will leave a place that provide them the income to pay their bills, to live. Okay, they will leave. If they do not have the mental peace or joy, it equals to misery. So think about that. The allure of the funds that you're paying them in a paycheck don't matter to them because they're so frustrated because the training is not where it should be. The follow-up is not where it should be. So people quit. People move on for a peace of mind. And anything you take away from the day class, you got to think how I'm creating that. Okay? Because you have the power, you have the authority. And that's what they're looking for. And training to me is part of that initial seed that you plant in the soil when you're planting something, right, to grow. And you have to look at how a farmer would nourish, or even a gardener would nourish it, be connected with it. You invested in it. Now, of course, you get some employees that no matter what you do, it's just never good enough. I'm not talking about them because we know eventually what's going to happen on that path with them. I'm talking about the ones that are in it, that show up, that ask questions, that be attentive enough, that want to succeed, and encourage of just now starting there, or just encourage, oh, we're going to get some information, we're going to get some knowledge. Those are the ones that you really want to invest in because those are the ones that will stick with you. And even if their past change in the sense that they eventually leave for whatever reason, technically not tied to the experience at the company, you still will feel a rapport. You still have a person that will leave or have to leave or resign for whatever reason it's not tied to the company environment. They would be your brand ambassadors because they would talk about, and this have I been years ago when I worked, wasn't many, but I worked for the company that had it together. I still brag on them. I'm still talking about them. That people will look at that and not only want to use their services, but go work for them. You see what I mean? I'm telling you, it's an investment. If you take the time to do it, I'm telling you, it will continue to pay its revenue more so than any financial gain, because financial gain can go up and down and what have you for the most businesses. But at any rate, that's what I'm talking about. So that's the what, because you want to avoid those mistakes. You want to avoid customers being confused because the employee really not sure. You want to avoid of overload, okay, of computer system and screens and all this, even though you have to do this and that, but you want to do it in a way that it's a smooth process, that you provide the follow-up and the resource that they can go to make sure they're on track when they get out of training. That's what you want to do. You don't want them to feel neglected or rushed through training, overlapping of processes. So to me, training need to be an everyday thing for a company and a monthly review of what we learned that worked, that didn't work. That is actually working, or something that's no longer working anymore. It can't be outdated and left on the shelf and that's it and da da da. It just can't be a training center that all it is reproducing more employees because the last quantity employees left. So you retraining the same thing. You got to find out. That's what I'm saying. If it's a high turnover rate, you got to stop everything. You got to open the book. You got to come with a magnifying glass. You got to look at the root. And I'm telling you, most of that leads right back to training. And it's the training message. It's the same on the floor. Most companies will have one training model. Then you get on the floor, it's like a whole different thing. That builds distrust. That builds disloyalty from the employee, in the sense they're not loyal and committed. That's what I meant by that. Because it's an imbalance way to make them feel that everything what they experience in training doesn't really exist. It doesn't really matter. The company doesn't really care. So they don't care, right? And then they end up leaving. So let's get to the strategy to succeed. So the strategy to succeed is, number one, if your company got the resources to produce an effective training program, number one, you need to do it. Okay. If you got the means to do it, you need to do it. And to do that, for example, you need to have the right trainers. You need to test the trainer's ability to teach the actual material. And to get that is that you need to have a feedback system from the employees that lead the training to match up that they are right fit. Like I said earlier in this podcast, not everybody can teach everything, right? I know some companies that I've been exposed to, they have more than one trainer, and then they'll train that part and that part, right? That works. And again, the feedback helps. Then when you get feedback to that, it's no good if you get feedback and you do nothing to change it. Okay, you can't look at the glitz and glamour of the training portal as if it's this and that if the person can't communicate it correctly. Okay, now number two, you want to provide an extended ongoing training. That is key. That's also will help with the feedback, because with the feedback it's going to mirror if the program is sufficient to give the information, and then the extended will prove to show was it too much information. See, when you give someone too much information, okay, I don't even need to say that. You can fill it in the blank. You can't. A human mind can't process too much information in a short period of time. We can go back for a good example as a baby. When the baby is born and the baby is exposed to all this talking, it's repetitive, it's consistent, right? Over time, the baby start picking up the words. How we learn language, I guess what I'm trying to say. It's a process. It's a level. All right. Now, if we to the point that we need people on the front lines and da 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 da, and getting into that area right there, then you got to look at it as a way of how you can have some type of other support. So that's why I say provide an extended and ongoing training program. If it is what it is right now and you got to get this information out and it's so much, try to think of it in blocks of giving to the employee, and try to also thinking of thereafter the trainer is still connected, the trainer is still going over everything. Don't just do it 1 month after they hit the floor. You do it all the time because there's so much information. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, now the next part of that is moving on to provide a healthy expectations. Like, you got to have a healthy expectation to what they need to expect, not saying that this is one thing and then it changes up. So you want to expect from them what you give them. So you want to set reasonable goals on the, not in the fast type environment. They get trained and then you start doing quality review on them as if, oh, you're supposed to be stellar. I mean, the employee just learned the content a week ago or 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean? So you want to create that so they can feel that they're empowered. All right. The other thing is to notice that if you have little resources to do your training that you know you need to train these employees, right? You got to think of being really creative, coming with ideas that can take the resources, the little resources that you have, and implement that in a way that is nourishing and they can remember. That's the key. Okay, to keep them in a series of steps of building up, right? You need someone to answer the phone and you know they can't really answer the phone. Teach them what they just need to know to process half of the call and move on to the next. You see? So that's what I suggest to do with that. Let's get to your task to dusk to dawn as we wrap up my podcast today. And really, number one is that you need to consider revamping the training model. Okay, if you have a high turnover rate, there's no excuse. You got to look at that training. Okay, you got to look at the process from the training to the floor, right? Because they leave them from the floor to the door. Okay, and so you want to provide that type of feedback that is ongoing. Okay, even to the point on the floor of how is the training going? How is the training material matching up to you to be able to do your job? Okay, so that's what you want to do, how it measure up. Also, you want to have the right tools, okay? The right, like the system. If the system is old, like I said before, as a dinosaur, it's time to upgrade. It's time to look at it in a way that you can change how that system is processed to a new way. You don't want them, you don't want the employee to have so many tasks to complete the job or to be assigned so many job responsibilities because so many people left. Okay, that's when you got to take ownership of that and rework that to be able to have the training that's sufficient based on the information provided. If you're teaching them 10 different processes and expect them to go out there and remember and execute that, you got to look at the learning curve. Each new process or in-depth way to do this or that takes a learning curve. So think about that. The second, your task to dusk to dawn, is to consider the follow up. And when I say follow up, it's having a team. It could be what we call a buddy system. And with that, that buddy is constantly communicating with it's not really like a team lead position, it's more of a mentor position, okay? It could be considered almost like a team lead, but you don't have to be. And there's a way that you're working when they have a contact person, they build that rapport, they feel good and confident. Creating something like that can work for companies that don't have much resources, right? It definitely can work for a bigger company. But if they don't have many employees because they're leaving, that becomes a problem. But at the end of the day, you got to fix what you got to fix. Work with what you got to get it done. Your next task to dusk to dawn is number 3. Going back to the systems. If your system, again, is so old, okay, is slower than a turtle on roller skates, okay, you need to consider of changing that. Now think about the softwares, the major softwares that we use to even put on these computers constantly are what? Updating. They come up with something new. Now I know that's expensive and you gotta look at this and that, but you gotta look at it in a way, in a decade or over a decade, nothing changed. Got to try to find a way that you can upgrade and make it more efficient to look at it. You got to look at the root, not just look at, oh, we made it, we got the funds coming in, that's it. All right. Also to remember that always that our minds can process information and people learn in a different way. So when you look at your training and you evaluate that and get that feedback, you're going to look at what you can do and what you can't and what you aim to do. And also the heart of that is to know that humans process information differently and in a series of time, as if, like I said, planting a seed, or when a baby's learning a language and the culture. It's phases. And I know in business, you got to get it out, you got to get it done. But at the same time, you got to acknowledge that it takes time, and repetitiveness in doing a certain new task is vital. So with that task to dusk to dawn, let's get to motivational takeaway. So number 1, when we focus on the concept to nourish a team, this is your motivational takeaway. We find solutions that achieve a well, knowledgeable, and happy employee staff. Okay, nourish the team is training them the knowledge they need to succeed. It's feeding them, it's giving them water as a farmer would a seed. Okay, it's showing them how you need to do it on a repetitive way, even after training, as a baby is learning the social and cultural aspect of being a baby to a child to going up to be an adult, of learning the language and the culture. So you got to think of training employees as implementing change. Okay, and you got to think training is just like change. And everybody in business, especially management, know change is major. You plan it, you execute it, you reevaluate, you make sure it's a big thing, you got to roll it out. Some companies do changes like it's nothing. I mean, the emotional ties to that, the frustration, the setbacks is major. So you got to go with it in a nice series of phrases, of stages to be able to execute it well and to nourish the mind of the employee that they do not feel overwhelmed and want to leave. Because change is significant and training is just like change. Okay? Thank you. Thank you again for joining me for my podcast episode from my podcast show, Surviving Your Journey to Success, just to give you some information to not only stay in contact, but with the other things that I offer. I provide career consultation, offering the first 30 minutes are free. Thereafter, there is a fee access afterwards per hour and can be discussed on a case by case basis, depending on your need. So, if it is an emergency and you need some consultation regarding your career or choices that you're about to make moving forward, in a sense, in your personal type objectives, then you can definitely contact me. The primary way to contact me is by email, which is info@nichelanderson.com. Now, I do have a toll-free number on my website. Now, that is actually only for webinars when I'm doing like a free webinar and you're calling in. Once that number is through that medium, and it's only really for that, so it's not really connected to me directly. Now I am working on that, but for right now it's not really, and when that change you would definitely get a notice of that to go forward. So just to recap, my primary way is info@nichelanderson.com. All right, so the other thing I want to share with you is that I also provide business courses and self-improvement courses. So that overall objective is to help you to create strategies that work for you, to get you motivated, to identify the ways to get your or keep your joy and your mental peace. So I do provide that on the basis of your objective to gain success, and as I like to say, sustain success. You can find information on my courses that I release on my official website, which is www.nichelanderson.com, and you can go there and you can look at the different courses that I am releasing that are available. These courses are self-paced. They will be identified if they're considered to be like live sessions on a regular basis, but for the most part they are self-paced. During that time I do have live sessions that once you have signed up for the course, you will see that in the schedule of what days that I'm available live, that you can talk to me and we can go over the courses going forward, right, on those particular topics. So that information is basically on my website that you can go to, which is nichelanderson.com. Now, I want to do a special call out for listeners that I have seen in my stats that are following me, continue to follow me, which I am thankful for. Now, to get connected more, to stay connected, I'm asking you to consider to join my newsletter that I do send out. And to do that, you just have to submit, of course, your name and your email. I don't spam. You could always request to be taken off the list. I don't send thousands of emails because I don't like thousands of emails from a particular source. So I keep it very in a way that's informative, of course, because obviously you like the content because you hear and you enjoy it and you're getting something from it, which pleases me. To expand that and to move forward and to get into other ways that I can expand what I'm trying to do is to form a newsletter, to get that set up in a sense that I'm communicating that I can send that out more quickly, actually, through a podcast or any type of thing or production that I'm doing, where a newsletter is more, in the sense, faster to get that contact and to send it out on blast, right? And more opportunity to send more content compared to like social media characters to be able to get that message out. So do consider that to join my newsletter by providing, and you can find that link at the end of each episode. I have that link to basically to sign up here for Nichel E-List Tips newsletter. And you could do that, and you can see that and click, and it's a short form, online form. It is secured, and you can complete that. All right, the other thing I want to talk about is basically to subscribe to this podcast. If you haven't, please go ahead. Of course, this is going through Podbeam. I have two podcasts. This one, of course, you're listening to is Surviving Your Journey to Success. And you can subscribe. Of course, you should see the subscribe button here at the bottom of this episode or at the top, whichever device that you're using. Now, I'm also available on iHeartRadio, on Spotify, on Google Play, on iTunes, and any other podcast directories for feed distribution. You can connect that way and subscribe. And if you like it, share it. Now, I am on social media. And so you do hear me a lot talk about Twitter. I'm mostly active on Twitter. I'm also active on Facebook. For the most part right now is Twitter. And I like the whole concept of keeping it short and sweet. But I'm connecting to people in different parts of the world. And then Facebook, I'm definitely on there as well. And you can connect me with that. So my Twitter handle is basically twitter.com/Nichel Anderson. My Facebook page, facebook.com/Nichel Anderson fan page. My official website, as I mentioned earlier, is nichelanderson.com. That is my official website. It's mainly focusing on self-improvement, motivation, life coaching, leadership courses, things that I really love to help people, what I have learned, and also to connect and to try to create the content in a way that you can feel comfortable about it, open up about the areas where you're struggling at. And it's usually pretty much our career and our personal life. So these self-paced courses give you the opportunity to really think things out, because you got to think about it. In this world, our mind has to be able to process so many things in so little time. And so you're here, you're there, you're everywhere, and you don't really get the opportunity to stop, to think, to react in a way that moves you forward, and to get things done, to get a blueprint. And that's basically the two courses that I recently released, and I will continue to evolve from that and add more courses, of course, or redo some of the courses that I have. And Blueprint for Success is a very good one in the sense of identifying that and moving to a point that you have a plan and that you can move forward. And that's the key. So at any rate, check that out on my official website, and definitely connect with that and share it with somebody else. Now, the other thing I would like to share with you is that, of course, I am an author. And so my very first book that I got published, that I was called to do, it was my purpose, and I see it now. And it's a part of my whole podcast show title. It's called Corporate America, Surviving Your Journey to a Success. It is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's available in book form and ebook. Okay, so you can get it at any book retailer in the world that have access to the ISBN for each book. So you can get that, and you can download it, or you can purchase it, or what have you. But go ahead and check out my book, and if you like it, share it. Okay, and so here is my closing statement for you. Be you that strengthens and inspires your ability to be strong in your journey endeavor. It's a good thing towards your mental peace and joy, always to your success.